Okay, we asked you guys before the break, what is the most random thing that you are insecure about? And I thought I'd seen a lot here at the project, but you guys always surprise me. So, let's start off strong. Someone's insecure, actually I should say, when I say yours, if you could stand so we know who you are. The first one, pepperoni nipples. Don't stand, please. That's terrible. Someone else says they have calcium spots on their nails. What a hard life. I'm so sorry to hear that. Your baby hands. You're driving. Not knowing if I have a booger. How bad my poop smells? Yeah, don't ask someone to help you with that. Eating spicy food. My hair. Okay. My dance moves. Okay, this one I don't know what this means. I don't know if it's weird. Anyways, using a loofah. What does that mean? I don't want to know, actually. I don't want to know. Other things like my nose, my small calves, my overbite. What else do we got? Guys, you got some... You know what? We'll stop there. That's fine. Thank you for giving those to me. Okay, a couple things. I thought there'd be more like, there were a couple of parallel parkings. I don't know if it's random, but it's common, right? Or public speaking. I think that's a big one. But again, that's not random. But, okay, I get weirdly insecure in the kitchen. Like if I'm by myself in the kitchen, it's fine. But when you're cooking with someone who knows what they're doing, it's like you don't know how to dice a pepper all of a sudden. Like you just second guess everything. But the most random thing that I'm insecure about, I feel nervous telling you guys this. The most random thing I'm insecure about is buying toilet paper. It's just the worst. I don't understand it. Like, I know it's weird. Some people get weird about like buying like tampons or condoms. I think toilet paper is up there. Like, it's weird. A couple weekends ago, I had a house full of people, and I'm like, I have to have toilet paper for them. Like, you can't run out. And I want them to have plenty. And so I went and bought like this jumbo pack. Never again. I was like, everyone's gonna look at me. Even carrying it into my house, I'm like, my neighbors are watching. They're gonna know. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just, you're gonna think of this now when you buy toilet paper. And on a side note, did you know Bulk Barn, they now sell reusable toilet paper? Right? It's disgusting. But it would save you the trip. Yes? No. Just kidding. Don't do it. But in case you're feeling insecure about your insecurities, guys, we're not alone, okay? Celebrities are just like us. According to my very reliable internet resources, Beyonce is insecure about her ears and her feet. Poor Beyonce. What a life. Kim Kardashian, a hairy forehead. She was insecure, so she got it lasered off, and it's smooth as a baby now. Vince Vaughn, his thumbs. He doesn't like to show off his thumbs. He's insecure about them. Again, celebrities have a hard life. And Zac Efron does not like to watch himself on screen because of the size of his head. So, okay. So again, we all have insecurities, even the rich and famous. And they're always like, there's tons of layers to our insecurities, right? Like the deeper you go, the more like complex, the more painful they're gonna get. We all have at least one, if not more, insecurity that's really going to dictate like your thoughts, your actions. Like even the most confident of people, even the ones like they just seem like they have it all together. Then you find out what their insecurity is, and you never would have guessed it, but it is still there. Like it could be something physical, like we learned tonight, about your body. Like maybe you just don't think you're attractive. Maybe like at work, you just don't know if you even have what it takes. You're like, I have nothing to offer. Like, why am I here? Maybe it's at school. If you guys are in exams, I know a lot of you are in exams, and it's terrible. It's the end of you. And like, maybe you're struggling. You're just lagging behind. You don't want people to find out that it's not going super well for you. Maybe you can't find a job, or it's been like too long since you had a relationship, and you're like, am I enough? Like, is something off with me? Is something wrong with me? Or just those like random like bad habits or quirks you just hope never anyone ever finds out. Like we all have these areas of our life that it feels like you do not fit the mold. Like you are overwhelmingly just inadequate, or you're just defeated. And I found we respond to our insecurities in very different ways. So this might be you. Maybe when you feel insecure, you make yourself like small and timid. Just like you want to be unnoticed, do what you got to do, and get out. Or on the opposite end, people I think can really overcompensate. Like you might go above and beyond because you want to be seen, you want to be noticed, you want to be affirmed for what you're doing and who you are. But maybe you end up like saying or doing things you just didn't expect. You're like, why did I do that? Like our insecurities, they will shout at us. Like they'll remind you like why you suck, where you fall short, why you're not enough. And that's the lens that you really start to like live your life through. So if I would like to sit down with each of you individually and ask you, okay, what are some of your biggest insecurities? I'm going to guess it's a safe bet that you each have a list as to why you have that insecurity. Because there's always reasons, right? Like whether someone said something to you, they said it about you, or just like a difference you noticed in yourself that you haven't noticed in anyone else. So like regardless of the insecurity, there's going to be reasons behind why you have it. So for this month of December, we've been going through this series called Of Kings, Prophets, and Prostitutes. We wanted to get into this part of the Christmas story that is just the most boring, but we didn't want to tell you it was the genealogy of Jesus because then you wouldn't come. So that's what we're going through, though. It's the most boring part. Because there actually is a ton of stories within the genealogy, and everyone involved is obviously there for a reason, and includes people like kings, like prophets, and prostitutes. So the first week, Thomas, he talked about the kings in the genealogy and just like the power and the influence they had. And how each of us, whether we believe it or not, like you are a leader. You have influence somewhere in your life without you realize it, and it's how you use that influence. And last week, we had a guest speaker, a senior high youth pastor, Ruben. He came and spoke about the prophets that were included. Those like middlemen who were not in a place of power, but in a place of service. And when you're in that middle place of not knowing if you should speak up or not, you're not where you used to be, not yet where you want to go, how do you live and have an impact when you're kind of stuck in the middle? So this week, we are left with the prostitutes. So I want to get into Rahab. She is a prostitute, part of the genealogy. Just to clarify, I've already had some concerned people approach me. We did not each pick someone from the genealogy that we most resonate with. Just to lay that down, okay? Thomas wasn't like, I got the kings. And I was like, yeah, prostitute, right here. Just want to make that clear if you're worried. It was how our schedules worked out. But overall, so there are 5 women in the genealogy. Each one has their own crazy story. Rahab, she's no exception. But I need to give you a bit of a backstory about Rahab. So at this time, her story first, it's found in the book of Joshua, which is in the Old Testament. It's the first half of the Bible. Joshua is sort of one of the first books you'll find. So there is a leader at the time named Joshua, and he is leading God's people, which are known as the Israelites, into the promised land, which is the land that God had promised for them years earlier. So they're going to go reclaim it because there are currently people living, called the Canaanites, occupying that, the promised land, which included Jericho, the city of Jericho where Rahab lived. But the Canaanites are known to be very evil, very intense, had lots of idols. So they're very intimidating to the Israelites. But again, God had promised, this is your land, you're going to reclaim it. So that's, just to give you an idea, that's where our story kicks off. So in Joshua 2, it says, Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp, and he told them, go scout out the land around Jericho. So the 2 men, they went out, came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab, and stayed there for the night. Okay, just to clarify. So yes, she was a prostitute, but she was also an innkeeper. And her house was like on the edge of the city, so it was not uncommon for these men to go stay at this inn, even though she was a prostitute. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight. They are spying on us. So the king of Jericho, he went to Rahab and said, bring the men who have come into your house because they're here to spy. Rahab had hidden these men, but instead she replied, yes, the men were here. I didn't know where they were from, but they left and I don't know where they went. But instead she'd actually hidden them on the roof beneath some bundles of flax that she had laid out. So the king's men went looking for them. And then verse 8. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went to the roof to talk with them. I know the Lord has given you this land, she told them. We are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror, for we have heard how the Lord has made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt. And we know what you did to Sihon and Og, we'll go with that, 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above heavens above and the earth below. Now swear to me by the Lord that you'll be kind to me and my family, since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my family. So the men reply, yes, we give our lives as a guarantee for your safety. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us this land. So the story goes on, and the next day she lets them out through the window, through a rope, and they reaffirm their oath and like, yep, if you don't betray us, we will come back for you. So there's a lot that happens in the story with Rahab. And I get it is surprising, if we're honest, that there is a woman, let alone a prostitute, who is in the genealogy of Jesus. Whether it was back then, thousands of years ago, or even now, a woman who is in that business, it can have certain negative assumptions or just negative connotations that go with it about who she is, or if she chose that lifestyle, or if she couldn't, or whatever the reason is. I think it is safe to say that there would be a ton of just abuse and mistreatment and just exploitation. She would not have been a respected woman. Rahab, she was this walking advertisement for the rejected. She was definitely less than and very much looked down upon by her peers. She would have had a list of insecurities like the rest of us. If you or I were to sit down with her again, she could probably easily tell us why she felt inadequate or why she was an outcast with someone just very little influence. But I think the thing that really stands out about her is that she did not hide from her reality. Everyone knows that she is a prostitute. Every time the Bible mentions her, every single time, it's either Rahab the prostitute or just the prostitute. That sucks, if that's how you refer to all the time. In the Bible, they don't try to hide behind it, and neither does she. At no point in the story does she offer excuses or even hide behind her list of insecurities. Instead, she actually pivots from her reality, and she chooses to create this safe space for these spies who are her enemy. So the point is not that she chose to be a prostitute. The point is what she chose to do despite that. She chose to help who she could with what she could when she hid these spies. So besides her story in Joshua, and then again being mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus, Rahab, she's mentioned 2 more times in the Bible, both in the New Testament, which is the second half of the Bible. She's mentioned in the book of Hebrews and the book of James, and always for the same thing. She became known for her great faith and for the significance of her actions when she helped those spies. And if you're thinking, okay, yes, that's good. She overcame them. She rose from the ashes. Good for her. She looked past her insecurities. But for you and I, it's not that easy. And it's not. You can't just look past them and dismiss them and just hope for the best. It's not very easy to do that. And there's another guy in the Bible. His name is Moses. And his story actually takes place before Rahab and Joshua, where the Israelites, they are still slaves in Egypt. And God says, okay, Moses, you're going to be the one to bring them out of slavery over to the promised land. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but Moses was terrified. He was completely terrified. And there's this conversation between God and Moses, and these are the questions that Moses says to God, because he was, again, totally afraid. He's like, why are you asking me? Who am I to do this? Why did you pick me? What do I even say? What do you want from me right now? Why should anyone bother listening to me? Why am I worth paying attention to? And he continues to go on. What if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm lying? How many times have you thought that in your own head, where you're, even with your friends or just at school or at work, and you're like, what am I doing? Why would anyone pay attention to me? Am I worth listening to? It just kind of goes on in a loop in your head sometimes, right? And God actually, he goes on and answers every single one of Moses' questions. Like, he encourages him. He affirms him. He gives him solutions. He's like, okay, here's what you're going to say. Here's why I called you. If they do this, do that. He answers all of them and totally equips him. But it's still not enough for Moses. He's still freaking out. And finally, he says to God, he's like, no, like, I'm not good with words. I never have been, I never will be. God, please send someone else. And it's at this point that God actually starts to get angry with him. Because Moses, he was so fixated on his insecurities that he would not move. And the story goes on, and God does end up providing with Moses with the support that he wants in the form of his brother Aaron, but he does not let Moses ignore his responsibility. He can't back out of it. So the good news from either story, Moses or Rahab, is that God makes it clear that he can use you despite your insecurities. Like, you're not going to hold him back. But it's your actions, or your lack of actions, in the case of Moses, it will definitely affect you, and it will affect those around you. So, like, the main difference here between Rahab and Moses was this huge choice that they each made. Like, Rahab, yeah, she chose not to let her insecurities or her inadequacies to hold her back. Well, Moses, he dwelled on his insecurities, and he pushed back, and he was unwilling, he was afraid. Like, imagine if Rahab had just really fixated on her insecurities and let them completely run her over. Instead of, like, helping the spies and making a deal with them to save her and her family, like, what if she had just, like, brushed them off and told the spies, like, just don't bother coming back for me. I'm not worth it. It's fine. Like, I'm going to make you look bad. I'm going to hold you back. Just whatever. Leave. It's fine. Like, if Rahab had just brushed off her past or just wallowed in her reality, like, the outcome would have for sure been so different. Like, how many of us do that? Like, take a second and actually think to yourself, don't out loud, because just inside. Like, what do you do when you are faced with your insecurities? Like, how do you respond when you're against your insecurities? Like, do you kind of, like, brush things off and be like, it's fine. It's hard. I'll get over it, whatever, but it's fine. I'll deal with it. Or are you someone who maybe you sit down and you wallow in it? Like, you let your insecurities make you small or timid. And you're like, I don't know, like, people don't want me here. I don't think it matters. I'm not going to be missed, so whatever. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not saying that some of these questions are not legitimate, because they are. But it's when they can be so crippling that our insecurities, they hold you back, and they have that final say. And I will fully admit to you, I have definitely been in both camps before. Like, I've definitely felt sorry for myself for way too long. And other times you're like, no, it's fine, whatever. But then you keep talking about it for like 2 more weeks. Okay, so how do we get over this? Or at least, how do we deal with this? If you're anything like me, maybe you're like, okay, if I can start to just tackle my own insecurities, I'll work through them, then maybe I can step out and I can do what I actually want to do, what I want to try, or I can have an impact for others like Rahab did for those spies. But it's if I can get myself squared away first, then I'll have an influence. Like, it's that if-then mentality, which does make sense. It does. But here's the problem. Like, who do you know that does not struggle with insecurities? Like, whether they're 10 years old or like 60 years old, there's always an insecurity that someone is working through. Unfortunately, like, it's not something you just deal with once and move on. I so wish it was. But like, years could literally pass before you ever feel confident enough in yourself to actually step out and do something, to make a move. Like, there will be a ton of missed opportunities during that time, guaranteed. So, like, what if you were to reverse that, like, if-then mentality? In Matthew 22, Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. Like the first and greatest commandment that God ever gave us out of this whole Bible was to love him. And the second one, they say, is equally important, and that's to love your neighbor as yourself. It's like the order here is God, others, and then you. But if you want to fully, to learn to fully love and accept yourself, in spite of your insecurities, then start with your relationship with God and others. That's where we have to reverse our thinking here. Because the best way to secure your identity in Christ is to provide that security for someone else. You become secure when you help someone else become secure. Have you ever had it where you're encouraging a friend or you're even giving them advice and you hear the words you're saying and you're like, oh wow, I really need to hear that too. It applies to me too. If I can say it to them, can I say it to myself? Because every single one of us, we are craving so much that love and that affirmation and just freedom from our insecurities. So if the second greatest commandment ever told to us in the Bible by God is to love your neighbor, then aren't you deserving of that love too? So rather than just sitting down in defeat and pity and feeling sorry for yourself, waiting to receive that love or waiting for someone else to reach out to you, start with your neighbor. Start with your friend. Because when you do, that is when you will find the security that you are looking for. And I get this can feel backwards. It's very hard to believe that this could be legitimate or to really follow through with it. Especially when so much of our world, it will tell us, okay, look inside of yourselves to figure out who you really are. Dig deep, pull away from the noise and the chaos, and look inside to find yourself. But that's not the case. There is this endless hole in each of us that we cannot fill ourselves. We can't fill us with our own self. We are not meant to go off by ourselves and just figure this out. Because our insecurities, it will always keep the focus on us. It'll always come back to us. Here's why I can't do it. Here's why I won't do it. Here's what this person did to me. It will always bring it back to you. Because like Moses, we'll have a list of why we can't do it. Then like Rahab, she made this choice to not let her insecurities hold her back. She didn't let them disqualify herself from having this influence from God. She was willing to really put that list aside and be okay, who can I help with what I have? God, he is always calling us to action, not just contemplation. Yeah, you need to reflect, you need to contemplate, but do it within the action and the messiness of your life. Because if you wait till life is not messy, oh my gosh, that will never happen. In her story, she actually goes on, Rahab's story, in Joshua in chapter 6, where the Israelites, they're taking back the city of Jericho. And there's fighting and there's chaos, and that's when Joshua sends the 2 spies back into the city to save Rahab and her family, because she kept her word. And rather than just letting her go and being free, she was invited to join them, to live with the Israelites. And so she does. And she learns about God. And she actually ends up marrying someone in the tribe. And because of that, she becomes a significant ancestor of Jesus. And she goes on and has a baby with her husband, a boy. They name him Boaz. Boaz grows up and he marries someone named Ruth. And Ruth has her own book in the Bible. It's an incredible story. And Ruth is now also part of the genealogy of Jesus because of the choices that Rahab made. There are so many ripple effects here from the choices that Rahab made. No one, unfortunately, no one can make these choices for you. But it is when you consciously choose God and then others that you'll finally find that security and that identity that you're looking for. So if there's one thing I can challenge you on, to stop using your list of insecurities as an excuse not to do something or like not to move. Because the reality is, like, we all have lists. Like, we've all been defeated. We've all been overwhelmed. We all have reasons as to why we've been wronged. But the point is not to compare your list with someone else's and see who's had it worse. That's not the point. But if you're here and you are a follower of Jesus, then you need to know that God is calling you to act. Like, we have this responsibility to bring his hope and his peace to those around us. And our responsibility to that needs to be bigger than our list of insecurities or reasons why. If you're here and you are not a follower of Jesus, maybe it's your first time, you're off the hook. This does not apply to you. Like, I would still encourage you to go after your insecurities, to work through them, to not let them hold you back, and invite other people into that with you, because there is so much freedom when you share your burdens with someone else. I remember there was a time when I was just consumed with my insecurities, and I had actually been hired for this job, a small groups pastor at the project. And I was a couple weeks in, and I was like, oh, wow. I was like, what? Who did they hire? I was like, what have I done? Why am I here? How long can I fake this for? Like, this could end badly. And it was a lot of like self-sabotaging and just toxic thinking, and it's always covered in shame, right? And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I can't tell anyone, which is wrong, but there's no logic to shame. And I had a hard time like thinking straight. And again, I had that like if-then mentality. I was like, okay, if I can figure this out and work through it, then I'll be fine. I'll be stronger. It'll be good. It did not work. And it wasn't until probably, it was a good couple months into it, where finally I was like, okay, this is enough. Like, something has to change because I can't keep doing this. It's getting worse. And every time I'd try to like talk to God about it, which I didn't love it because I was really frustrated with him and I was doubting him. And every time I'd try to talk to him about it, the idea of counseling came to mind consistently, every time. And at that point, I was like, okay, but counseling is kind of like you're throwing in the towel. Like, it's kind of a sign of weakness. I don't think I'm there yet. Yeah, again, I was very wrong. And so finally, I'd come to this point where I was like, okay, talk to God about it. I was open to it. I finally just opened myself up to the idea of counseling. Told my best friend about it. And those two decisions dramatically changed things. Like, finally bringing it to God, opening myself up to counseling, and then telling my best friend, like, I would not have been able to get myself out of that on my own. Definitely not. So like, through those decisions, finally I was like, okay, there's hope again. I can have confidence again. I can make plans. I can step forward into this. I can, do what I need to do and feel confident about it. It's like, maybe you just need to start by asking yourself, like, what is your biggest insecurity and why? Like, where are you withdrawing? Just, you make yourself smaller. Or have you like brushed something off like it's no big deal, but yet you are still thinking about it? Maybe you know exactly what the solution is, but you are ignoring it like I did. Like, it could just start with a very honest conversation. Being like, God, I don't know if I'm enough. I don't even know if I'm the right person for this, but I don't want to hide behind my insecurities. So I'm going to step out. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to hope it doesn't crush me. Like, if you're defeated, if you're overwhelmed, don't start with yourself. Because remember, the first and greatest commandment in the Bible, love God, then love others. Because the best way to secure your identity in Christ is to provide that security for someone else. It's like, what will that look like for you practically, daily? What is that going to look like? Now, if you are new here, or you're just new to all of this, or if you've been here for 10 years, if you just have questions, we don't want you guys to be alone in this. You shouldn't figure this out on your own. So I'd encourage you to text the word NEXT to 555-888. And again, it's just going to be a digital devotional, something for you to walk through with God, with friends, whatever you need to do. There's the option to talk to a pastor if you want. but it's there for you to use, so take advantage of that if you need it. But wherever you are with this tonight, whatever you're facing or your insecurities, whatever it is, please remember, love God, love others, because that is where you will find your security. Let's pray. God, thank you that we can come to you with our brokenness and with our insecurities and know that we are not too broken for you, that you are still bigger than our insecurities and that they don't have to have the final say. But God, I pray for each of us tonight as we're working through our own sets of just inadequacies, that you would remind us of your hope and of your truth, that you would surround us with family or friends who could support us in this, and even that we could have the courage to speak up, to choose differently than how we've currently been choosing. God, I know this is a lifelong process. I pray for grace for each of us to be patient with ourselves and with others, God. We ask this in your name. Amen. Guys, just a reminder, next 2 Sundays are different. It's a digital service next Sunday, so we won't be here. And then on the 29th, we're going to have an awesome fun night. You want to be here on the 29th. And hopefully at Christmas Eve too. We'll see you. Have a good night.